A very good afternoon to you from Silvana Pavlovska and In Focus. Today is the 1st of September 2023. We are going to share with you an opinion from Ordan Andreevski. He's one of our contributors to the program, and we thank him for it, for this opportunity to be able to share with you what he has written today. The title of his opinion is Why Britain, Australia and the G7 Need a Strategy for Countering Corruption, Disinformation and Racism on Macedonia. So why Britain, Australia and the G7 need a strategy for countering corruption, disinformation and racism on Macedonia. The problem, says Ordan, elite corruption of historical and archaeological facts, disinformation on the Macedonian civilization and nation state, and blatant racism undermine Britain's, Australia's, and Macedonia's democracy and their international soft power. It emboldens kleptocrats, racists, and new despots in the G7 to steal Macedonia's history, culture, civilization, language, and the archaeological treasures, and to deny the fundamental human, civilizational, and democratic rights of the people of Macedonia, or the Macedonian people. Since independence in 1991, the Republic of Macedonia has been a bullied and battered European democracy. It has sought peace and collaboration with the Balkans, the European Union, the G7, and the rest of the world, including Australia, based on mutual respect, truth, and ethics. It has demonstrated its credentials as a good international citizen by respecting international laws and by supporting various efforts to bring peace, justice, and sustainable development in the world. The idea that countries can determine their own identity free from external coercion is central to the United Nations Charter, as well as to the Britain's and Australia's foreign policy. In 2017, Macedonia was coerced by the G7 to change its name and its links to the ancient Macedonian kingdom, despite the democratic wishes of the Macedonian people expressed through a failed referendum. Furthermore, the ruling elites in the G7 arrogantly chose to ignore the facts on the ground and the indisputable evidence that Macedonian civilization from prehistoric times to date is separate from the Hellenic, Bulgarian, Albanian, and Serbian cultures. Since its independence in 1991, the G7 has forced Macedonia to change its flag and constitution as part of a cruel and inhumane strategy for Euro-Atlantic integration. This is at odds with the United Nations Charter and conventions, international law, and the European Union's Charter of Human Rights. The recent revelation that the British Museum has finally woken up to the reality of long-running heist of its cultural treasures worth tens of millions of pounds provides an opportunity to critically analyze the ethical responsibilities of this 264-year-old London institution and its meddling in geopolitics, racism, and misrepresentation. Dr. Peter John Higgs, the museum's curator of Greek collections, sculpture, and the so-called Hellenistic period, was identified in British press reports as the person alleged to be responsible for the heist. This corrupted curator was entrusted to advise the British Museum and its international collaborators, like the National Museum of Australia, on its policies on Macedonian civilization and its artifacts. The same curator, Dr. Peter John Higgs, provided so-called expert advice on the ancient Greeks exhibition in Australia and New Zealand. The ancient Macedonian kingdom is falsely presented as a Hellenic kingdom. Through a vast array of stolen Macedonian objects from present-day Macedonia, Turkey, and Egypt, the exhibition misrepresented the ancient Macedonian civilization in favor of ancient Greeks. The ancient Macedonian kingdom is misrepresented as belonging to a Hellenistic period instead of the Macedonian period. This form of racism denies the Macedonian people and their civilization their right to claim ownership, self-determination, and human rights. This benefits the Hellenic state and its propaganda played out since 1913, when Macedonia was partitioned without the consent of the indigenous Macedonian people. The settler colonizers then went about bringing large amounts of refugees from Turkey into occupied Aegean Macedonia in 1923, and renaming all places and people with Hellenic names in order to claim that Macedonia is Greek, despite the historical evidence. The proposal. Just a reminder that this is an opinion from Ordan Andreevski, and Ordan says the proposal. We just covered the problem according to his opinion, which many of you may share. Or if you don't already know those facts, you may wish to do your own research and find out. So what is Ordan proposing? The proposal: Britain, Australia, Macedonia, and the G7 should develop and implement a strategy to counter the systemic corruption, disinformation, and racism against Macedonian civilization, people, and the nation-state Republic of Macedonia. The strategy's first objective is to get their domestic houses in order, with a concerted effort to stop all instances of systemic corruption, disinformation, and racism. This will give them credibility at home and internationally. The use and abuse of blatant propaganda must be stopped immediately by reviewing all government policies. Those making false and misleading narratives and campaigns must be called out and stopped. Accountable governance must become the new cornerstone of acceptable ethical behavior in the free world. The second objective should be to provide full support to the Macedonian people in the Republic of Macedonia and in the occupied parts in Aegean Macedonia in Greece and Pirin Macedonia in Bulgaria. This can start by terminating the toxic and illegal Prespa Agreement and the Bulgarian Agreement. The same countries that partitioned Macedonia in 1913 must fund a Macedonian Justice Commission modeled on the Yaruk Justice Commission in Victoria, in Australia. This would enable collection of powerful evidence from the indigenous Macedonian people about systemic racism, injustice, and harm they have experienced by the European imperialists and neocolonialists from the G7. It is time for all Macedonians in the world to play their part in truth-telling and collection of a body of evidence needed to make transformational change. The European imperialists must acknowledge the legitimate detrimental impact on Macedonia and its people. Only then can we start to build a better future for Macedonia and its people. Why this will work, says Ordan Andreevski? The most important actions democracies can take to counter corruption, disinformation, and racism is to reform their own legislation and political culture in order to be compatible with international law and ethics. And anti-corruption, anti-disinformation, and anti-racism strategy will signal to the world that they and the Macedonian people no longer accept corruption, misinformation, and racism in Macedonia. The British Museum should prepare a comprehensive list of artifacts it has from the ancient Macedonian kingdom. How were they obtained, and when it plans to return them to the rightful owners, the indigenous Macedonians and the Republic of Macedonia. Countering corruption, disinformation, and racism on Macedonia is the missing part of Britain's, the G7, and Australia's commitment to an international law-based order and their foreign policies. So that's it. This is the opinion from Ordan Andreevski, a very well-informed intellectual of Macedonian background, who, in our eyes, is able to articulate the facts and the truth of the matter. So he's identified the problem. Then he has put together a proposal, and there you have it. So the British Museum is put on notice to do the right thing, return the artifacts and other objects belonging to the Kingdom of Macedonia, and provide answers to how those were obtained and why the imperialists, which are mentioned, the countries mentioned, the G7, why are they not following international law? Why do they pay lip service to international law? That includes Australia. Why does the Australian government, federal government, state governments, territory governments pay lip service to international law and they're not abiding by it as they ought to, as they are the signatories of those policies? So there you have it. Once again, thank you for listening to Silvana Pavlovska and In Focus. If you've got any views of your own, by all means, send them to me in English or in Macedonian. You don't have to be of Macedonian background to voice your opinion. You can be of any background, and you'll be treated equally by myself as an independent journalist with years of experience, work experience, knowledge, and skills. It's the truth and the wisdom that we seek. So good day to you, and I'll see you soon. Bye now.